Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. Big news. Starting next week, my guest and I will be answering your questions on the show. Do you have a question you'd like to ask a therapist about relationships or mental health? Or have you seen something about a relationship or a mental health issue in a movie that you'd like to ask about? If so, send your question to therapisttheater@gmail.com. To protect your identity, we won't use any names when we answer. And speaking of next week, I'll be joined by Chris Murphy, who's currently in the process of completing his internship in his master's program for marriage and family counseling and therapy. It'll actually be the first time that I've ever had a guest on that's married to a previous guest, and I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am for it. And I know that you'll be excited to know that the movie that we'll be discussing is the Oscar-winning movie A Star is Born, starring Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, and that song that, even though it won, you can't really get away from even if you wanted to. So this week, I'm joined in the theater by Byrd. Aaron's a therapist here in Music City and is literally the very first person I thought of to have on the show. He's another former classmate and friend who I am just so honored to have on. The movie that he brings and the story that he tells is just amazing. So I don't want to hold this up for a minute longer than I have to. Let's go ahead and dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. You weren't just at the top of the list. You are literally the first person I thought of for the show. So you will forever stand above every other guest.
I hope every guest is listening to this right now. Thank you.
And last night, after Leigh-Ann and I watched the movie, I was going back through our text thread, and I saw that I asked you on October 26th because I had put up some story on my Instagram about I've got this idea that I'm working on. I need you guys' help, answer this question or something. And you were like, what's the idea? And I didn't respond on Instagram. I just texted you in all caps. Oh my gosh, I'm going to do a podcast and you have to be on it. It's going to be incredible. Oh my gosh. I have the receipts that you were the first one. Let's start with why therapy? What was it that made you want to pursue it?
So it's kind of a long, confusing road that it took me to get here. Back in middle school, I definitely utilized the school counselor a lot. He became my best friend. I think he's a huge reason why I got through it the way that I did. I came through stronger. And so then I got into high school and I got really involved in music. And I started realizing that music has a total healing effect on people. Well, on me. I was the most dramatic middle schooler. I would light candles and listen to Sarah McLachlan when I was sad. And my mom would walk in and be like, I don't know who you are. And I'm like, in the arms of the angel, Mom. So
Did you just have that commercial with the pets just on loop?
On loop. And I'm crying at the animals. I'm like, poor babies, they feel the same. So I got really involved in music. I started writing songs. And when I got to MTSU for my undergrad, I went for the recording industry. And it was awful, but I got through it. And the reason I wanted to do this so much is because I felt like I was helped by people who had stories through music. I wanted to do the same thing. And music is such a way to just express yourself in a way that nothing else can, because you can express yourself through sound and people get it. It's a language that we all speak. So I got through that and I started working at a record label, little independent one, and I really just wasn't enjoying myself. And the politics of music the industry was coming really close to destroying everything for me. So the day that I really decided I was going to turn in a notice, I was looking up programs for psychology because I've always really loved psychology. I took it even when I didn't need it. I would take classes just because. And so I stumbled across school psychology. And like literally before I walked out that day going, I'm not coming back, bye, I had already had a plan. And I went back and I got into the master's program at MTSU doing school psychology until I realized that it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. There's a lot of testing involved. And I really wanted to sit down and connect with people the way that I kind of always have been, through talking, through communicating. And school psychologists do incredible work. I just wasn't sure it was perfect for me. So 3 weeks in, I backed out of that. So there's a trend here. And I started looking into counseling programs because it took me going to school psychology to realize counseling is what I love. There was a class on it. I was loving this class. And I finally looked up and I was like, will I be able to do this? And they were like, maybe. I was like, no, I want to be able to do this. And that's how I found myself applying for Trevecca. And it was the best decision I've ever made and the scariest decision I've ever made.
Let me back up.
Sure.
So I heard you say that your school counselor in middle school, super instrumental. I gotta admit, like a preconception that I have, and this is not because as an adult I've encountered school counselors and asked what they do and dove into it. I think as a kid in school, I always had this stereotype of a school counselor that they didn't really do anything, and at most they were kind of an administrator to where, like, if a kid could identify a need, they would. I mean, as an adult, I would say refer them out, but as a kid, I probably would have said they would have sent them somewhere. What was it about you being able to meet with your school counselor that really helped you? And you said you even came out of middle school stronger. What was it that he or she was able to offer you during that time?
Support in a safe place. And actually, while you were saying that, I remembered way back in second grade, it was the first time I ever saw a school counselor. I was having issues. My dad was out of town for a month doing a training for work, and I did not like that. And so I was having issues leaving the house. So this counselor came and got me, and we would just talk. And just having somebody, and this is the same story with my middle school counselor, just having a place where somebody wasn't telling me, Aaron, stop crying. What's wrong with you? And they would just listen to me and sometimes tell me what I wanted to hear. As a kid, that's all I wanted. But just be able to remove me from the bad situations of the classroom and still be in the school, but a safe zone where I wasn't afraid. And because that was a huge thing, is I was afraid of everything as a kid. And they just really provided me with the support that I needed in the school. And it was, I can never thank them enough for that.
Wow. So, I mean, I'm hearing you say they gave you, like, attention, like specific attention towards you. They gave you space. They took you out of a classroom where, I don't know, 30 other kids, something like that, into an office. So they literally gave you space to where less distractions, less other people, but also emotional space to where you could let stuff out in the most Aaron way that you knew how to at that time. So it wasn't, I mean, I heard you say, like, oh gosh, can't you just stop crying? Like,
I cried a lot.
You know, not it wasn't even like, hey, you can come in here and talk about stuff, but you got to do it this way. They just brought you in and gave you that space and allowed you to be you. And how was it that helped strengthen you?
I don't know. I think just by having somebody to support me, I was able to take I always felt like an outcast. And so by having somebody tell me, you know, I feel that. I've been there. I have been the outcast. It kind of made me less of an outcast or gave me a new way of looking at it. And so I wasn't so, I mean, I think all middle schoolers are insecure in some way. It's such a transition. But I think I left with a different security than maybe my peers who didn't go to counseling had. And by the time I got to 9th grade, things were different. And maybe it was a transition of middle school to high school and hormones are still raging, but not as bad. But just having somebody there to go, yeah, Aaron, I hear you. You're not crazy. Really helped me just kind of sit into it and be like, oh, okay, so I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the "you're not crazy" thing is something that helped get me into therapy as well, because I had this stigma that I had attached to it that was counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it, is for people that are crazy. Now, at that point in time, I couldn't have told you a solid definition of what crazy was.
Yeah, fair.
I think, and even to this day, I still think it's kind of a catch-all term when you want to dismiss somebody.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, how many guys have said about an ex-girlfriend, oh, she's crazy, you know? How many people have said about a friend that it didn't work out with, yeah, they were crazy, I had to get away from them. And, you know, it's totally discounting their story, their experience. Now, that's not to say that what was going on wasn't atypical. That's just to say it's a really easy way to dismiss somebody. And so I think to have somebody, whether they say it explicitly or even just model it, say, you know, you're not crazy. This is not, you're not, nothing's going on that is out of the ordinary. You know, I think it does help. Certainly what's the word I want to look for? Not deregulate, de-escalate. It certainly helps de-escalate, you know, kind of the storm of emotion and thoughts that might be going on inside of you. But I think it also, you know, Sasha said in her episode, everybody feels marginalized in some way. I think in middle school, that's like multiplied by, I mean, a billion.
A billion,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, I think you're just now like coming online to being a part of the human race. And so you still don't know, oh, as a person, this is something that everybody thinks or struggles with or deals with. You know, you're just now kind of coming awake to, I got a bad case of being a person.
Yep.
So to hear that somebody was able to help you, like, just, I mean, give you the space to, and I don't know, I mean, explicitly or implicitly just say, hey, you're not crazy. That I could definitely see how at that age or in adulthood that would help. So studying music, discovering music, was it helpful for you as an outlet? Was it helpful for you as, well, as like a creative outlet? Like, I've got this creative energy that I got to get out of me, as an emotional outlet, like it helps me process. Like, where did music hit for you?
I think the answer is yes.
Which, by the way, I mean, we're in Nashville,
Right.
so what better place, you know, to fall in love with music than here?
Heard. Yeah, you're totally right. And I always thought it was such a curse that my parents moved me here to Nashville when I was younger. And then I realized, oh, but there's a reason for this.
From where?
Atlanta.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which Atlanta is a pretty big musical place too, but different.
Do you think if you would have stayed in Atlanta that you would have come out a little more ludicrous?
Ha! Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen you in the Fast and the Furious. That would just be...
Ooh, it would have been a different situation. I was in a different kind of town. Little less safe than where I grew up here.
Yeah.
My creative energy was probably the same as my emotional energy.
Okay.
They came at the same time. So when somebody would, it sounds so cliche coming from somebody who writes songs, when somebody would break my heart or cause me to feel horrible about myself or whatever, I would put that into words.
Yeah.
Into a melody. And it would basically get those gross feelings out of me. So I was able to look at it in a new way and experience it and kind of just shape the way that I would look at it. So a little bit of like me creating my own narrative through writing, through sound. I was able to get those things out and tell them what I wanted from them.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it makes perfect sense. I had a buddy who it was from Germany. It was from Germany. Started studying piano when he was 3. Studied classical opera, so like way into the classical thing. And he used to tell me that all of the classical pieces, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, Bach, like everything, there's a story in there. And he would describe, like, he would pick a piece and he would start playing it, and he would describe, like, this is what they were thinking as they were writing it, and this is why this crescendo is there, and this is why that decrescendo is there, and this is why this part's staccato. And it fascinated me because, I mean, I grew up loving music, pop music, rock music. I didn't get into country till, like, college, but it finally hit. Thanks, Nashville. But, like...
You can have that one.
To all kinds, and was obsessed with the stories that were told in it. And so to hear, you could even go back way farther to music without words, and there were still stories involved. It kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I think to have music as an emotional outlet, it seems like, especially earlier on, it was such a gift. Because I think even for me, I don't know if I identified, well, I didn't really come online to my emotions till much later in life. But like, I didn't have an emotional outlet when I was in high school. I didn't have an emotional outlet really when I was in college. I think in college, the closest I got was I had journals.
Yeah.
So like, which I don't know where they are. I really should. Those are things that I would want to have in my own evidence locker. But like... I have pages and pages of like things that I would write out. I think it was more so what I was thinking than what I was feeling, because I don't know if I could have really told you what I was feeling at that time. But to have something like that, do you still have those songs?
Ooh, I got a binder full of lyrics. Okay. And it's funny for me to look at the progression or to look back on where I was at that time. And I'm super harsh on them now. I'm like, what was I thinking when I wrote this? I just remembered, like, so that was an outlet. And actually, like, in class, if I was feeling some type of way, I would just pull out paper and start writing. It didn't matter if it made sense. Sometimes I was writing and doodling. And one time I accidentally turned in one of those things with an assignment. And I don't know why I was mad. I was 14, so of course I was mad. And I had drawn a tree that was like broken, and I was like, why do you want to cut me down like a tree or something? And my science teacher was like, Aaron, are you okay? And I was like, that was not for you. Please give that back.
I was going to ask, maybe you just read The Giving Tree or something like that.
Oh, that's a good book though.
But really
that is so funny. I just thought of that. I was like, no, that's for me. That was not prepared for the world.
Yeah, but I would imagine that has to be what the order of the way that things should be. Like, you can look back at the earliest stuff and be like, what in the world is this? Whether it's the content or the composition.
Yeah.
And then as you get older and you do it more and more and more, and it being the process of writing a song or a poem or prose, or the process of just getting your emotions out, I would hope that just the practice of it would get easier, and the quality, I hate even using the word quality, but like the quality of it would improve as well. And not necessarily like somebody's going to judge what you're writing, but in the sense of maybe the authenticity is what I mean by quality.
Yeah.
Like your real stuff is coming out, and you have a little bit of an easier time getting to the real stuff sooner than having to wade through feeling like you have to make sad look this way. You have to make angry look this way.
Yeah. 100%.
Because like your sad doesn't have to look like my sad.
That's exactly what would happen, is the practice of it helped me understand it more and portray it more clearly the more I did it. It started off with like some random, I was super metaphorical as a angsty teenager. So I don't know, fear or anger or something would be the yellow eyes in the bush staring at me. And if I listened to that now, I'd be like, okay. But then it was able to actually take that same thought process of metaphors, but make it make more sense, even to me.
Yeah.
And that helped me understand. I would say that my emotions never weren't online, which could make for an interesting childhood too. I've always been high emotions.
Yeah.
Just knew what they were, but this gave me a way to kind of contain them
Yeah.
and understand them.
Yeah. Well, I think saying that you used a lot of metaphor and stuff, I remember when we first kind of, and I don't remember what class it was, it might have been lifespan, but like when we first started learning about metaphor in school, it was, you know, kind of on one hand, metaphor is a way that you can help people conceptualize their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody can't say, I'm sad, you know, maybe you can help them understand I'm blue, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of introduce them to things that way. And on the other hand, metaphor can also be if somebody is too afraid to say what they're feeling, they can maybe put it in the context of a metaphor and get it out that way. And for me, like, I work in visuals. Like, my brain, everything has a picture, everything has an image. And so for me, metaphor is a giant part of who I am as a person, who I am as a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, I mean, I don't think you could get Josh Treese without getting metaphors. Like, that's just how it is. I think what I've gotten better at, though, is, just as a person, is getting to the feeling and not having to get through a metaphor.
Yeah.
So that's cool too. So you got into a grad program studying school counseling at MTSU?
School psychology.
School psychology. Difference between school psychology and school counseling?
Oh, yeah.
Question mark?
Sorry, I told you I'm a fidgeter. School psychology is very much testing and getting to, it's learning, I think, is a huge piece of it. Like, is there a learning disability? How can we make this or help this person learn better? Okay. And assessments, in a way. So we were getting close to an IQ assessment that I was going to have to learn how to give. That was daunting, let me just tell you. I mean, having to, like, assess somebody's IQ, I'm like, I don't know about that.
I just saw a video the other day about, like, IQ testing is not in any way standardized. There's several tests for it. None of it's regulated, and
it's very left open to interpretations, I think. And, like, they would do it in a way where it was recorded so that the teachers who were quote-unquote experts at giving them were able to give feedback. But I don't know, something about that. And I just thought, I mean, those are so important, and I will not take that away. I just didn't think that was going to work for me. Kind of bored in those classes.
Mm-hmm.
And they really wanted me to learn statistics, and I am very anti-math. So
Amen.
I was sitting in that first statistics class staring at my teacher going, I am never going to make it through this.
Mm-hmm.
At least he was really nice. He actually gave me a letter of recommendation after I quit. So super nice guy. School counseling, on the other hand, is kind of like what we were describing. But in the school systems that we have now, especially in high school, they're very much there to get you on the path to college.
Career counseling?
Yeah.
Close to that?
Very much so, yeah. And they're in charge of, I don't really know what they're in charge of, but it's a lot of that. And it wasn't enough, because like I said, I've been emotional my entire life. So I am a glutton for emotions, and I wanted to sit there with people, and it wasn't enough of that for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's changed a lot. I think people who were school counselors 20 years ago may not like where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I may be speaking for people that don't want to be spoken for, but I definitely talked to the head of the school counseling program, and she was like, we wear different hats. Even she had I just got a feeling of it's not what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I was like, okay, I'll leave the school system completely then.
Yeah. I love hearing you say that you were in touch with what you liked and what you didn't like. Because I think especially, you know, for anybody that's maybe in high school, in college, still trying to figure out what they want to do, let's be honest, out of college, like in adulthood, trying to figure out what you want to do. I think that sometimes we make it a lot tougher than it should be. Like, certainly you got to pay the bills. You got to have a job. But I think it's really tough sometimes as a person to trust your heart and your gut and that magnetic pull that you have towards certain things. Because I know that one message that I kept trying to tell myself was, you know, oh, well, I really like doing this, but that I can't make a career out of that.
Yeah.
Or like I'm not qualified for that, or I can't. I'm not smart enough. I mean, that honestly one of the core false messages in my whole life. I'm not smart enough, for that. Totally coming from a place of fear. Totally coming from a place of just scared to try.
Yep.
And, some of my biggest work as a person was not getting over the fear, because the fear is still there, but just listening to the fear. What's it trying to tell you? And just being willing to try. So you started applying for programs, you got into Trevecca. And when we first started talking, I realized I didn't ask you this at the beginning, but we've weaved ourselves right back there. I first met you in our group therapy class. Was that the first class that you took there?
It sure was.
Nice.
Don't know how I managed that, because that is not how you're supposed to do things.
Yeah.
But I missed orientation because there was traffic and it made me mad, so I just went home. Let's be totally honest. And then I texted, or emailed, I was like, hey, I can't make it tonight. Is it okay? And they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'm like, I'm going home. And that was me also afraid of A, being late, and the fear of people being like, oh, he's already late. And B, the fear of starting something new. And so I found an excuse to turn around. And that is actually a common theme in my life, at least up until this point. I'm trying. So yeah, I definitely didn't. And they gave me the class list, and I thought it was linear. So I just went down the class list and started making it. So my first class was group therapy. I just decided to jump into the deep end with no ladders nearby.
That was a tough class to have first, because they divided us up into two groups, and we literally did
Group therapy.
3 group therapy sessions, ?
It's hard to say.
We did a good amount of it. And I mean, it was true group therapy, like, kind of almost like a MTV Real World kind of model. Like, here's 7 strangers in a room, being real.
Well, see, that's the funniest part about that is I remember Dr. Kennedy saying, okay, I need you all the first hour, go find somebody who you don't know and get to know them. And I look around the room like, who am I going to go to? And every single one of you walked over to me. And that's how I realized that you all knew each other already.
Oh, yeah.
And I
remember
there
coming up to your desk. I think I was coming back in from the bathroom or from lunch or something like that. And just thinking like, oh, I don't know you. Like,
who are you? You're new here.
Which I got to say, even looking back on now, is such a strange thing for me to think, because in my introverted nature, for me to see somebody I don't know and be like, oh, yeah, hey, I'm going to get to know you. Like, I'm just like, ooh, what, how much caffeine did I had that day that I had that kind of bravery to walk up to a stranger and talk to them?
It was the best experience. I actually have a Facebook post about it, because why not millennials? About how the first day went so well, and I think this is going to be the best thing because of those things.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm introverted, as outgoing as I am. I'm introverted. I'm shy, and being in a crowd of people I don't know is one of the most uncomfortable things for me.
Yeah.
So sitting in there, and at first I was okay because I thought we were all on the same playing field. And then I realized that you all had classes together, and everybody just turned, Aaron. And I was like, oh no, this is a pack of cheetahs, and I'm like a mouse.
But I think at that point, I think that was second semester for us. So we'd only had the first 4 classes. So it wasn't like you were joining in
halfway through.
That we were 6 months in and you were coming in then.
But it helped. The fact that I think everybody did know each other, and you were all so willing to say, hey, new guy, come sit with us. And I was like, I can sit with you now?
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing.
And I got to tell you, I cannot imagine. One of the things that I loved so much about the group of us that went through school was this, we just did it all together. Mm-hmm. Like, we had lunch together. We studied together. We were in class. We had table buddies, but the tables weren't that far apart. So we were all, and we really did, as we went along, we just got to know each other. And I think now that we're all out, one of the beautiful things is we're referring clients to each other. Mm-hmm. We're calling each other to consult, that kind of thing. One of my favorite memories was, and I think this happened in multiple classes, you were a front row person in class, which for me, being ADD, being introverted, growing up Southern Baptist, like I did not do front row anything. And so like you were front row, I was 3 or 4 rows back. One of my favorite things in the world was in the middle of class texting you to try to get you to laugh. And then just from the back, just seeing your shoulders go up and down and being like, got him.
Oh, I remember. And I think that's actually what ended up getting us in trouble one day.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
But I'm not sorry about it.
Not bitter. Not bitter.
I'm not sorry either. I thought it was great. You know what the beautiful thing is? Had I not messed up my schedule and had I gone to orientation that night, I would not have met the people that I knew, and we would not be sitting here right now.
There you go.
So it took me an extra semester to graduate because of that, and I was mad about it in terms of I had to spend extra money, but I kept looking at it going, if I didn't do this, I would not know anybody that I know now, and I don't know how that would have been different. It worked out perfectly.
Yeah,
it
may not have been
but
different
perfect.
bad.
Yeah.
It would have just certainly been different.
But I really like the way it worked out.
Yes, and I think that's another thing that I don't know, like doing your own personal work gives you is the ability to kind of own your story a little more. Because it's not necessarily like, oh, you know, you did the schedule the wrong way. Certainly there's choices that I had in my past that maybe I would do differently if I had the chance to do it over, but I love where I'm at right now. Like I love the life I have, and to go back and kind of like in Back to the Future, like to go back if you undo a choice, if something happens differently,
everything changes.
So in school, you know, they start talking about internships and specialties and that kind of thing really early on.
Oh my God.
Like too early on. Did you, when you got into the program, did you have an idea, even if it was in the back of your mind, of any population of people or any particular specialty that you wanted to work with?
Yeah, there is a very specific population that I actually got into counseling for. And I remember, because Trevecca is a Christian university, I have not had a great past with the church. So that was part of the reason why I was so afraid. And I remember the first day of class, Dr. Kennedy asked us, if you were going to run a group, what would you run it on? And so I tested the entire room. And I said, I want to do one on sexual identity, meaning gay, straight, bi, pansexual, whatever you want it to be. And I kind of waited because I'm like, I don't know what kind of situation I'm in right now. I don't know these people. And he was like, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And like 5 people came up to me afterwards. They're like, I would love to do a group with you. Let's do that. And I was like, okay, what are y'all doing? But it was perfect. And so I definitely got into counseling for the LGBTQ community. I remember, I want to say 2012. That's just the number that pops into my head. There was a string of suicides relating to people being gay. And that just like destroyed me inside. And I wanted to help. And I remember at one of her concerts, right after one of them had taken his own life, she put his picture up there, and she was so emotional. And I could feel that just by talking about it and her acknowledging it and being sad openly about it, that she was helping. And I remember sobbing at my desk watching this, and I was so mad that this kept happening, because I'm like, what's the world doing to us to make this happen? And so I was still in music at that point, and I was like, I'm going to empower people. And at that time, I thought I needed a massive stage platform like what she had. And it took realizing that I don't need to talk to the entire world at the same time. Talking to one person can change their entire world or my entire world. I mean, I've gotten stuff out of that's real. So I have always had my eye. And being part of the LGBT community, that was kind of why middle school was so hard. Because I was being called names that I didn't even understand yet. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I'm just sitting here. Why am I gay for sitting here?
Yeah.
What does that even mean? And so that's what I would go to the counselor for, and he would normalize it. And he would tell me, I don't think you're gay, which who knows if that was good or not. We got there. But being able to empower a marginalized group, and one that is still getting stepped on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no matter how much progress has been made, it's incremental as to where I mean, things we would hope would be or need to be or should be. I remember listening to an episode of Jonathan Van Ness's podcast
Oh, I love him.
on the Trevor Project and the people that founded that, and just I think it's tough to encounter the need for, I don't even know how to say it, awareness, the need for help,
Mm-hmm.
that LGBTQ people have when it comes to the way that the world treats them sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that particular episode of his podcast, I think Leigh-Ann and I were listening to, I want to say we were on a road trip back to South Carolina, but I just remember sitting in the car and just sitting silent for a while after that went off the air, because I think that it's really easy when you listen to that to feel angry, but to sit in your anger long enough to let that anger become passion,
Mm-hmm.
passion to change, passion to have an effect, passion to help, is something different.
Yeah.
Because I think that in order for that to become passion, you have to, I don't have a better way of saying it, you have to join the fight, and you
Yeah.
have to be willing to be vulnerable yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can be an ally and not be vulnerable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So the LGBTQ community,
Mm-hmm.
when you had that in you when you joined the program, that was something that was that confirmed as you went along? Like, did you pick up tools? Did you pick up understanding that you were like, yep, this is definitely what I'm...
I don't know. I think the answer is yes, because I learned tools. I learned how to think about things. In a weird way, I learned to understand the people who were opposed to it too. Now that takes a lot out of me, but I have gotten there. But it's like an understanding, not like I don't agree with,
Sure.
not condoning it, but I can get sort of understand.
Is it that everybody makes sense in the context of their story,
Yes.
kind of? Okay.
100%. And I have friends that when I met them were completely anti-gay. So I believe that people, it's just getting to know somebody and getting to know their story, like we just said.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, ooh, you make sense to me, and I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got through that, and actually in my internship, because I was pretty open about it, and I interned at a pretty liberal treatment center, very meditation, Buddhist, open. It was beautiful, kind of place. And I remember at one point I looked up and I had like 5 clients I was seeing, and every single one of them was somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. And my supervisor was like, "Are you okay with that?" And I was like, "Oh, are you kidding? I am living for this. I love it so much." And it helped me because my journey in that is not over.
Yeah.
Towards acceptance, towards understanding, towards being 100%. And so it pushed me as well as helping them. So that's not the only population that I
Sure.
love working with, but it is definitely like my baby.
Yeah. I think, and I think that anybody that sat in the theater on the show, all of us would say this. There's so much that we get from our clients that help us in our own journey as a person, not just as a therapist. Like, I don't just get stuff from my clients to help me become a better therapist. I get stuff that helps me become a better person.
Oh, yeah.
And 100% of that is being with somebody in their story and not judging them, but even if we do internally judge them, be willing to confront that judgment with our supervisor, with our peers.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I making that judgment? What is it that this is saying about who I am, what I'm feeling, and doing that process work too. And it just helps. I just think being with people helps you confront so much in yourself.
Yeah, you can't not.
Yeah. And I think what you said a few seconds ago, huge, and it's something that I've been able to talk about with a lot of people back home, is that it's really easy to be anti something when that something is this broad, giant, abstract idea.
Yeah.
To be anti-gay if you've never met a gay person is
It's so
really,
much
really
easier.
easy.
Yeah.
You know, but as soon as you sit across the table from somebody and you know their name and you get to hear their story and you get to encounter them on a really intimate level and their true self, it's so much tougher. It's still possible, but it's so much tougher to be anti a person
Yeah.
than it is to be anti an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that I love the most about where pop culture especially is heading, is that so many more stories are being told of people in the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling Leigh-Ann last night when we were walking our dog that the very first project I did in Lifespan, Dr. Hopkins let us pick the topic, and I said, I'm going to do the toughest thing I can think of, how we develop our gender identity.
Oh.
And I roped 3 other people into it, and my part of the presentation was I told 4 stories of people in the trans community.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, I kind of wrapped it up by saying, you know, anytime there is a shift in culture towards acceptance of a group of people, which I don't even like saying that because it makes it seem like a group of people is on the right side and they get to accept the other. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying it the best way I can think of. But like anytime there is that, it's because these stories have been told and there are people out in the world who are feeling the same thing, who are thinking the same thing, but don't know how to conceptualize it. And by hearing a story, it unlocks something in them. And they get to hear kind of what we were saying at the beginning. I'm not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'm not alone.
I'm not alone. Ugh, yes. Which is something that comes up again and again on the show, is the need to belong.
Yeah.
And so what I'm loving, and especially with the movie, it's one of those powerful things about the movie that we're going to talk about today. It's a story that people can hear, that people can see, hear that I'm not alone, hear that I'm not crazy, hear that there's nothing wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then by hearing that, they can step out into the light and say, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Which, no matter who you are, LGBTQ or otherwise, stepping out into the light and saying, this is who I am, is tough. It is so much tougher for some people than others, but it's tough.
Yeah.
Because of that vulnerability that it requires.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So with that, what movie did you bring?
We are going to do Love, Simon.
Yes, Love, Simon. Why did you pick this movie?
Well, I think the surface level is pretty obvious. But it
You
honestly,
love Jennifer Garner. I got
Jennifer
it.
Garner,
I got it.
100%. Yes, and Josh Duhamel. I mean, come on. Fergie's married to him.
Not anymore, dude.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, they got divorced a while ago.
I don't pay attention. Apparently. So you're just ruining my life over there. Anyway, but he was fantastic in the movie. But I remember sitting in theaters and seeing this come on as a preview, and I didn't know anything about it. And I realized that we were getting a major motion picture going in theaters everywhere about a coming out story. And yeah, we've seen people come out on TV before, but gay people tend to be, or the LGBT community in general, tends to be a support actor, never the front actor. Now, Will and Grace did amazing things towards helping us there. Ellen DeGeneres made major strides. Mm-hmm. We've never been in theaters before, to that extent. We've had, like right before that, there was Call Me By Your Name, mm-hmm. which I do remember sitting in the theater here in Franklin, thinking, I get to watch this movie in a theater in the Bible Belt. How incredible is that?
Yeah.
And I cried, because I cried everything. But this one had a broader appeal. It wasn't rated R.
Sure.
And it spoke to a younger generation that is so vulnerable with these things that I sat in the theater watching this preview going, oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
And it
I'm
wasn't
so
niche,
exhilarated.
because like Rent had come out in theaters too, but being a musical...
Exactly. It was broader.
Some people aren't going to come see a musical.
I do love Rent, though. Oh, now I'm distracted. Yeah. But it had such a broad appeal, because I didn't even... Maybe it's because it came out when I wasn't paying attention to things, but like I knew of Rent, never watched it.
Sure.
This one got the attention of... Because I'm a millennial. I'm on social media. I'm everywhere. It got the attention of the world in a way that I had not seen before. And it was just another normal story being told, and that I think is the best part of it.
Yes, it is so normal. Based on a book, right?
Yes.
Is it just a book or a series of books?
I want to say there's at least 2.
Okay.
And I own the book that Love Simon was based off of and have not read it. But I own it. I'm getting
I want to read it. I just finished a book last week, and I need another one to start on, so.
I think it's written almost like a diary.
Okay.
So you're hearing things from his perspective the whole time.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, in the movie, they had the structure of the emails back and forth, so
Yeah.
that was okay. So that's why you brought it. We finished the movie last night. We started walking the dog. Leigh-Ann did the same thing that she does every week. What are your thoughts on the movie?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say in general, which is great that I have a podcast now, I am not a short-winded person. I am a long-winded person who can talk a lot and has a lot of thoughts and a lot of words.
Proof.
But when she asked me that last night, I was just silent because I was still in it.
Mm-hmm.
It was so powerful and so moving because of how normal it was.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a movie that was bombastic. It wasn't a movie that was over the top. It wasn't a movie. And I said to her, the thing that I loved the most was it was the story of a young man coming to grips with his sexual identity. And he wasn't abused.
Mm-mm.
He didn't have a disorder. He didn't have anything like over the top about him. He was just a normal kid who people liked, who had a great family, who was fun and funny, and he was also gay.
Yeah.
And that wasn't something that and I liked this about him too. That wasn't at the top of his list of identities.
No.
He wasn't gay, and so he was also all these other things. That was just another thing about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the things I just liked the most about it was, oh yeah, this is just Simon.
Yeah.
It's like his mom said in that one scene, you're still you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that scene.
Which that was one of the parts that like open and giant weeping in our house.
Oh,
like at
me
that part.
too.
Even the dog was crying like crazy when that came on. So the movie starts out, he's just a kid going to school, but in the process, I don't remember how they got there. There's a website that
it was a kind of a website dedicated to their school to post secrets.
Yeah.
There's been websites like that. I think like postsecrets.com was a thing. So they kind of took that and made it unique to their school.
And it kind of looked like a Tumblr.
Yeah.
Almost. And it was just, you put up a picture and there's some words on it and it's anonymous. And he saw on that website, and I'm trying to think if before that there had been any clues that were dropped indicating like, I mean,
Yes.
I'm thinking like, I remember there was the part where he was getting ready to leave for school and the landscaping people came across the street and there was a guy that he thought was cute and like even tried his best to talk to, but like
Through the leaf blower.
hey, I'm sorry. And the guy just kind of points at his ear like,
Can't hear you. Don't know what you're doing. I'm
But
blowing
he
leaves.
sees this post on the website and it describes how someone's feeling as being on a Ferris wheel, you know, ups and downs, and it just repeats. And I can't remember how it ends up, but it's very clear that the person's talking about, you know, struggling with coming out themselves. And so he sees that and it stirs something in him, which I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier, like encountering a story.
Yeah.
That story unlocked something in him. And so this doesn't seem like it's very anonymous, but at the top of the post, there was an email.
It was a fake email dedicated to it, I think.
Yeah.
So the guy did everything he could to be anonymous, making a fake Gmail. We've all done it.
Yeah. So he makes a Gmail and then he writes that person. And the beginning of the movie, there's this whole narration by Simon.
Yeah.
And then the email that he writes this person is the same as that narration.
Mm-hmm.
So the narration came from the email. And so him and I don't remember the whole email, but he ends up calling the person he's emailing Blue.
Yeah.
They just started correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
And through that correspondence, started to get to know each other.
Yeah. Because they were, I mean, I was thinking about that heavily last night. I'm like, why? Why was this post so important when he saw it? Because they showed somebody at the school who was out and openly gay. So what was it about this?
Ethan, yes.
Yes. It was like we all need. It was a safe place for him to go, oh my gosh, I can talk about this and nobody can judge me.
Yeah.
And nobody can hurt me. But I can start speaking my truth.
Yeah.
Because like I say to everybody, you can lie to the whole world, but don't lie to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just where we start to struggle inside. So he was at a point where he didn't want to lie to himself anymore. Maybe he wasn't lying, but he wasn't being fully honest either.
I don't even know if he would have conceptualized at that point in time, lying, not lying. Because I think, that post, like it unlocked something in him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't even think, I don't know this. I mean, you might have a different read on it than me. I don't even know if he would have said he was consciously holding something back up until then.
I got the feeling that he was, just
Okay.
because of that narration at the beginning when he
Okay.
said, I have a huge ass
Yes.
secret, and looked
Okay.
at the window at the yard boy.
You're right, yeah.
And then there was the part where his friend is talking about a dream in the car, like the same scene.
Uh-huh.
And the friend goes, maybe it's something you're not seeing, something that's right in
Oh,
front
yeah,
of
that
you.
was a little on the nose.
And
yeah.
Simon's like, I don't know. What could that be?
Yeah.
Been there. But what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he knew, but when that starts to brew in you, it's terrifying because you're like, go away, push it. What are you doing to me? And so he was at the point of probably trying to name it.
Yes.
Trying to be like, what does this mean for me?
Mm-hmm. That was something that stuck with me about Moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
There was the scene where Juan and Sharon were at the table, and he in the first third of the movie where he's a little kid.
Yeah.
And he asks him something about like, am I gay? Because people had been calling him that.
Yeah.
And he's like, how do I know? Or how do you know? Or something like that. And Juan was like, you'll know when you know. Like,
That's the truth.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a appropriate time where you come online to it.
Mm-mm.
It's just the same as any other person, like discovering something about yourself. You'll know when you know.
Yeah, and it's a process too, because people's favorite question is, so when did you know? And they ask that in the movie too. His dad asks him, how long have you known? When did you know?
Oh, that was another.
Oh, his dad. Wonderful. But when somebody asks that, there's not for at least me, I can only speak for myself, but for me, there wasn't I woke up one day on June 23rd, 2001, and it was a gradual process.
You don't have a date circle on the calendar.
Yeah, this is the day I realized. Let's celebrate. Let's go listen to Lady Gaga and throw glitter on ourselves. I do that every day anyway. And I'm not ashamed of it. Shiny things are fun.
I gotta tell you though, I mean, glitter is just tough to get off.
Yeah,
So
but
maybe
why
there's.
would you want to?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
You're right, though. It is stories. But there's not I mean, he gave a time, but even then in the movie, it was kind of like, I think
Well, he said
around
about 4 years. It wasn't
Yeah.
like he said on December the 21st. Like,
right. And that's something too. Is it's a slow build. It kind of feels like music when you're getting to that major crescendo in the piece. That's when like it starts off and you're like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just me. And then all of a sudden you're like, there's something in me that's maybe different than my peers. And it starts building. And when that piece explodes is when you're like, that's what that is.
Or I would say it could even be like falling in love. Because, like, I can look back over the course of Leigh-Ann and I's relationship, and we're recording this on Valentine's Day, so, like, appropriate that we kind of... But, like, I look back on that, and I can tell you how I remember meeting her. I can tell you how I remember noticing her. I can tell you how I remember, like... At one point, she told me she was dating somebody when we first met, how she and that person broke up, and I was facing away from her, and I stopped what I was doing, and a big smile came across my face, and I did a little mini fist pump before I turned around. Like, I can, but I can't tell you, like, oh, I fell in love with her on this day.
Yeah.
I can just tell you little, I don't know, mile markers along the way. So there may be certain times or events that are significant enough to remember, but it's not like, you know, one morning before you stepped out the house, you were one way, and then when you crossed the threshold of the door, you were another, and so you took time to write it in a note in your phone. It's a process like everything else.
And exactly, and that's what we're watching at the beginning of the movie is his process. And I actually love the analogy or the comparison of falling in love, because that's something that the LGBT community yearns for, and it's hard to describe. It's not, we do want to belong, but we also want to love ourselves and not hate that piece of ourselves. So it is like falling in love, because falling in love is a confusing, can be tumultuous situation, and it takes time. I don't know about love at first sight. I think we've all felt something similar, maybe, but it does grow. And I think that that's very similar to what happens inside of somebody when they're coming out. Doesn't always happen that way, and some people hate it for a long time, and maybe they never get there, but my hope is that they will.
I think, and then of course, as he's like, you go through that first little bit, we meet his friends, we fall in the school, we kind of see a little bit of what's happening at the school. I just had a thought about, and this skips ahead so much, so we'll put a pin in it and come back, but just about his experience of coming out to his family. And I told Leigh-Ann, like, watching that part, I was at the very same time so filled with gladness and so filled with sadness. And like gladness because of how accepting, not all at the same time, because his mom was there right away, his dad got there, how like accepting and loving they were and supportive, but then sadness, thinking not everybody gets that. I mean, my extreme hope would be that everybody gets it, but knowing realistically, that's not everybody's experience. And so just even watching that on screen and just feeling that like gladness and grief at the same time over that. But that's skipping ahead, I guess. Let's start crying now.
Okay.
And then by the time we'll
be done crying, and then we can get somewhere.
All the tears will be gone, and then we can finish talking. When he gets to school, he's at play practice. They're doing cabaret. Little on the nose again, I guess. But he's got his group of 3 friends that he hangs out with. Only one of which I think I remember the name of, Leah. I don't remember his guy friend's name.
Friend.
Nick? Oh, and who's the transfer, the new girl?
Why can't I?
Yeah, we're terrible. So he's hanging out with them, but then when they get into play practice, we meet Martin. Martin is, I guess you could describe as over the top.
A little bit.
I think the kids would say extra. Is that what? Am I getting that right? I've been out of the slang scene
extra,
for a while.
He tries really hard.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out that girl's name.
Yeah.
Not
IMDb. Get to work.
And he's a lot. I put a different hat on while watching this last night.
Okay.
And Abby. Yes. Sorry.
I know that she was Storm in the past 2 X-Men movies, but I
like her even more now.
Yeah. You put a different hat on.
Yeah. I was like, what was I saying? And the first time I watched this movie, Martin annoyed me so much. I was like, what is wrong with you, child? And then putting on my hat that I had been wearing more as a therapist, I was like, it gave me some compassion for him. I saw somebody who wanted so badly to fit in and overcorrected.
Yeah.
And I think in that time of our lives, and maybe in the future, we do overcorrect, and that's when we become like what he was.
It's interesting that Simon is struggling so hard to become his true self, to accept his true self, and then to step out in the light as his true self. I think Martin was doing the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I just think Martin was doing the thing, and I know for a fact I was guilty of this growing up. Martin was doing the thing where he was trying to become different things to get that acceptance.
Yeah.
Depending upon who he was around. He would emphasize this. He would talk about being into that, rather than just, this is who I am. And yeah.
Which is funny because at one point he says, I don't want you to change me. I want her to like me for me. And that's where he finds himself changing himself or trying to be a bigger version or a lesser version. The total, like, both sides of this story are trying to figure out who they are in high school.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Simon's been emailing back and forth with Blue. Each email, I think both of them begin to share more about themselves and about their process. Like, I don't think either one of them is, which nobody's a finished person, but like when the emails start, neither one of them is where they are at the end of the movie. Like, their relationship helps carry the other along. Simon, it appears, has never had an email account before because of how eager he is to keep checking that email. The school has this weird like the vice principal, who's Buster from Arrested Development, is taking cell phones. And so Simon is like leaving class to go to the bathroom and like checking the phone in there, going to the library, logging into a computer to check his mail there. And when he does that and walks away, he does not log out of his email. Martin comes up behind him and sees his emails to Blue.
Yeah.
And I had gotten up at that point to get something from the kitchen, and I hear Leigh-Ann on the couch go, and I go, what just happened? I missed something. She's like, yes. And so she rewinds, and I get back in there, and I see him sit down at the computer, and his eyes kind of widen before the scene cuts.
You know what's about to happen.
Oh, my gosh,
or at least a direction.
Oh, yeah. And so Martin has a crush on, I've already forgotten the character's name. Abby. And
Internet.
I hope that the actors are not listening to this. It is, please, if you are, it's not a reflection on the job that you did. It's a reflection on me watching the movie at 10 at night.
Names.
Yeah, and also names.
Yeah.
Really tough. He has a crush on Abby. He comes to Simon and says, you're friends with her. Help me get with her. By the way, I took a screenshot of all your emails.
And I'm going to blackmail you if you don't.
Yes. And that is when I knew true hatred.
Oh, me too. Oh, in that moment, I was like, don't dangle that over somebody's head, because this is, and the fact that he prefaces it with, hey, my brother's gay. So to me, he has some insight into this process. And for him to then dangle that in his face and be like, either you do for me, or I'm going to tell the whole world your biggest secret that you haven't even fully formed yet. Hatred is a good word.
Yeah. And I think, it was having just seen it last night, it was a long time, quote unquote, before I could really get out of that, just feeling such anger towards him at doing this. So, of course, for a while in the movie, it's the struggle of Simon trying to help Martin. I think from what we can tell by his body language and stuff, like against his will, he was not into it. Even going as far, and this is where Leigh-Ann and I differed a lot too, going as far as like he was telling Nick that Abby had a boyfriend because Nick liked her.
Yeah.
To keep him and her away from each other so Martin would have a better chance. He was trying to get Leah to go after Nick while Leah was in love with him.
Yeah.
So really just puppet mastering his three friends, all because, oh my gosh, I'm so scared that Martin's going to release these emails. Very WikiLeaks. So
yeah, Snowden.
Then there's this moment where they're at a football game, and we're skipping over some stuff. They go to the Waffle House. They meet a waiter at the Waffle House. Oh, all along the way, Simon keeps meeting people that he begins to picture as Blue.
It could be. They fit some part of the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when they're writing emails back and forth, the way that the scenes are constructed, Simon's on his computer in his room, totally normal filming of it, and he'll write an email, and then Blue's response, there's like a blue filter
blue
over it.
I just picked up on that.
Yeah. And then, for the beginning, it kind of just shows maybe from the chin or the lips down on the person. I kind of thought it was the landscaping guy that he saw at the beginning of the movie, maybe, familiar jaw. But then as he meets people along the way, it becomes them. So it shows Graham?
Yeah, Brams.
Yeah, it shows Brams at one point. It shows the waiter from the Waffle House at one point. It shows there's a castmate or a musician
pianist
in the play who it shows at one point. So they're at a football game. Martin's the mascot. We only find that out because the mascot runs up to a group of people and is annoying, and then he takes off the mask.
Of course you are.
Yeah. It's a very special kind of person that's a mascot in high school.
I played something similar at a pet store at one point, so I can relate.
At a pet store? You were a pet store mascot?
I was for 4 hours before I didn't do it ever again.
Oh my gosh.
There's that theme. Yeah, okay.
Oh my gosh. Did the animals get freaked out?
No, I stood on the street corner.
Oh. Did you have an arrow that you got to flip?
I had a sign, and I couldn't feel it because the things were, and it was so cold, and I had headphones in, so I'm like trying to make the best of the situation. My first job ever.
Oh wow.
So I'm like 14, standing out there on Highway 31, very close to the road because I couldn't see.
Oh my gosh.
And at one point, I was dressed as a dog, and at one point the wind blew so hard that the entire head turned around backwards on me.
I'm sure that there was a kid passing by in a car at that moment that saw that and was scarred for life.
Well, kids, same. Okay?
And if that kid needs a therapist, you can get in contact with us at.
Exactly.
Just kidding. So Martin's there, and Martin decides he's going to do a big gesture.
Oh, go big or go home, I guess.
So they're doing, I think it's like a homecoming presentation.
It looks like it, yeah.
Yeah, like they're going to announce the homecoming king and queen or something like that. He runs up, and you can, I'm like watching it, and I'm like, oh gosh.
No, he interrupts the national anthem for that.
Oh, yes.
It's like, America's not happy with you right now.
Oh, yeah. Takes off the head, grabs the mic, and announces to the whole, I mean, bigger than school, because, I mean, football games for high school, it's like a community.
Oh, yeah.
But announces that he likes Abby, and he asks her out, he asks her to be his girlfriend, something like that.
Will you go out with me?
Yeah. And then she turns him down.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody.
I kept looking at Martin as being somebody who lacks boundaries. Oh, he would just plow through them. And unfortunately, this is a great example of what happens when you do that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was a total boundary. Just like, whoop, knock it over.
He wasn't picking up on boundaries, and he wasn't picking up on signals. And I would even go as far as to say, let's say that Abby did like him. Is that the best way to do that? Because what if Abby just didn't like having a lot of attention on her? Like, what if that's just a private moment between two people and needs to remain private?
Yeah.
But he just did it.
Huge.
He just plowed right through it, got rejected, and did not like that.
No.
Which
well,
who would? Yeah.
Jinx.
Who would?
Yeah.
And what they don't do at that point is they don't show Martin dealing with that. Like, they just kind of go to the next scene, and then I think 1 or 2 scenes later, Leah either FaceTimes or texts Simon to say, like, you need to get on the site.
There was one brief in between. He tries to call Martin to check on him, because I think he's genuinely concerned.
Yeah.
Because that was a pretty big rejection.
Yeah.
And also, he knows what's probably coming next.
Oh.
I mean, you gotta.
You know what's funny is I didn't clock that. Like, when I was watching it, I didn't think if I was in Simon's shoes after that rejection, because I never thought, well, this isn't Simon's fault. Like, he wasn't.
Well, none of it was, but it was still being held over his head in such a way that it could only go in one direction.
Yeah.
I think that he was extremely hopeful.
Yeah.
And so that, yeah.
So Martin releases the emails on the site. And when that happens and Leah tells him you need to look on the site, he goes, he reads it. And about that time, he starts getting lots of text messages from people. Hey, are you okay? Hey, did you see it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, hey, do you need to talk? Shuts his computer and is just in absolute terrified panic mode.
In that same scene, though, his little sister walks in.
Yes.
And I cry every time I watch that scene because she's such a good-hearted person.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes in, I reported it. They're going to take it down. And he says it's true. And she goes, oh, you just never said anything. And there was no judgment in her.
Yeah.
There was confusion,
Mm-hmm.
which is fair. But there was so much understanding, and I still love my brother no matter what, that when she starts crying and walks away, I started crying with her.
Well, because he yelled at her.
Yeah. And he was mortified and terrified. And
Total fear at that point.
And I get everything that happened. But
Yeah.
hey, what a fantastic little sister.
Oh, my gosh.
I fell in love with her, and I was like, I want to protect you from the world.
Yeah.
She's a good person.
I don't remember if... No, it wasn't in that scene that he talks to his parents. It was Christmas morning that he talks to him. I don't remember how we got there.
I
but
think it may have been the next transition.
yeah. So on Christmas morning, they're opening up presents, and he decides it's time. And of course, in the emails back and forth to Blue's kind of going through the same thing. He says, I'm going to go on vacation, or not vacation, but I'm going to be out of service. We're not going to have cell. We're not going to have email. I'm going to tell my dad. I don't know how it's going to go. We'll see how it's going to go. So that, I think, and Simon tells him, gosh, I admire you so much. You're so brave.
Oh, we skipped over that part. Yeah, real fast. Blue says that he's going to tell his dad, which then prompts Simon to tell Abby in the car. That's the first person he ever tells. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. I know the scene
that was before the football game.
Yeah, so that was before everything got released. So she knew. She was the first person he ever opened up to. Something about that scene. I get goosebumps every single time. I don't know why. The minute he says it, I find myself gasping. Goosebumps race up and down my body like doing the wave at a football game. I think because it's just so exciting to hear, exciting and scary, both, to hear him speak his truth.
Do you think that's the first time he said that out loud?
Yes. And I think maybe that's why it hit me so hard, because he finally says it.
Yeah.
And every time I like choke up, and her reaction is just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No surprise.
No.
And he even asks, like, did you know? And she's like, no, I didn't know.
Are you surprised? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not surprised, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, he does that, and that was such a pivotal scene. I don't know what it is about that scene, but I look forward to it, and I'm afraid of it every time it comes up.
Well, I think that I know this is true in my life, there's something to either speaking something out loud or putting it down in writing that gets something outside of yourself that makes it real.
Yeah.
If you keep it inside of you, you can just keep denying it. It doesn't have to be real, no matter how painful it is to hold it in.
Yeah.
But to speak it to another person, and I've said to my clients, I mean, this was something that's certainly true in my life, on the journey to change, you've got to be honest with yourself first.
Yes.
Then you've got to be honest to other people. Then you've got to be honest to God. And I put God at the end of that because I know there are so many times in my life where I would be praying or telling God something in the privacy of my own home. And I just wasn't dealing with it. I wasn't being realistic. Yeah. I was lying to him, like whatever it is. When I was honest with myself and I said it to another person, it became a different level of real. And then I could really be honest with God. And just that honesty and intimacy on all three of those levels, with myself, with others, and with God, it kept feeding into the other levels. And so it just allowed me to continue to up my honesty and intimacy game in all three arenas.
Yep.
So he says it to her, first time saying it. They're at the football game, and she is teaching him to talk about guys.
Yes. You got to have a friend that's like excited to do these things with you. I was lucky, and I had some.
Just teaching him to say, fine. Lean into it.
He's looking pretty fine. No.
He is looking pretty fine, yeah.
So robotic, and I don't know if I'm comfortable yet. Oh, I love that scene because she's like, yes, let's be you. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Let's start delving in.
It was almost like watching somebody learn to walk.
Yeah, and that happens. And I love her so much for that because and then she looks up thinking Waffle House guy might be the guy that he's in love with.
Yeah.
And she encourages it, and she even runs by going, hey, and he's in love with her, or he likes her, and so ooh, strike.
What's her deal?
No.
Yeah.
Her deal is that she's a human. Yeah.
So
supportive. I love her so much.
Yeah. Christmas morning, opening presents, and he just, I'm going to go for it. So he says, there's something I want to talk to you guys about. And he tells his mom and dad, sister already knows at this point, that he's gay. And mom's a therapist. Like they had some kind of therapist.
What a fantastic character to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what dad does. I do know that at some point earlier, he said something about his dad not being exactly the model of masculinity.
Yeah, because he cries at everything.
Quote unquote. But
Right.
I just thought, interesting you got Josh Duhamel to play this character who is like
So perfect.
the most square-jawed, like blonde, like, I mean, he literally played like an army hero guy in the Transformers movies in a
Such
Michael
great
Bay.
juxtaposition, though.
Like, yeah, yeah. So he tells them, and all along, up until this point, Dad had been making these jokes or comments about, he walks into Simon's room at some point, and Simon's on his computer, and he's like, "Oh, catch you looking up porn." Mm-hmm. It's almost like in that moment he was almost trying to like normalize it or something, like, "Oh, it's normal, it's natural."
Yeah, I kind of think that was like the, masculinity. Oh, you looking at pretty girls? Oh yeah, normal. My son's looking at hot girls on the internet, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he meant anything malicious by it.
Yeah, but I don't think he meant anything malicious by any of the comments he
No.
made to his kid. I do think he was unaware.
Yeah, blissfully
Yeah,
for a while.
Yeah, and so whenever he tells his parents, his dad makes some comment. I don't remember what it was.
It was, so which one of your girlfriends turned you gay?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then his dad gets up and walks away. Which is immediately followed up with his mom leaning in.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this, I don't know, couple of seconds in between that where my heart was just breaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
To have him share something so important and so intimate, and then to have his dad walk away.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how I perceived that moment. On the surface level, it looks like Dad's overwhelmed and can't handle it. And Mom is just like, oh my God, that didn't go well. And she leans into it, and she is perfect. And Simon quickly moves on, which, as you do. His dad. Yeah.
I mean, seeing from scenes later, it's so clear his dad loves him.
Oh, God, yeah.
And his dad, I don't want to say comes around, because I don't think that his dad was
ever against
him in it. But in that one scene, you just don't know what's going on inside of Dad. So all you see is Dad walking away. Mm-hmm. And it's tough as a viewer of the movie. And I would imagine if any of us were sitting in Simon's place, it's tough to not feel abandoned.
Yeah.
Or rejected. That's probably more accurate, not abandoned.
Yeah. Or this did not go well, Dad is leaving me.
Yeah. Yeah. But Mom just beautifully leans in. And, I think he asks her, like, did you know? And she says she didn't know, but when he was a kid, he was just so, I think she says open, something like that.
Like carefree,
yes,
spirited.
And then she says something like in the past 2 or 4 years or something, it just seemed like he was holding his breath.
Yes. Oh, got her monologue there.
Yeah.
What does she say? You finally get to exhale.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I lost it at that part. You finally get to exhale.
And you finally get to be more you than you've ever gotten to be before in your life. And I was like, that is so true.
Yeah.
And then she leaves him with that, not to.
Oh yeah, and then she walks off, and I thought, Mom, this is the wrong time to be walking out the room.
Well, in a sense, I got it, because she is a therapist, so it's hard for us to get out of that brain. I'm sure if any other therapists are listening, somebody in our life has said, "Don't therapize me."
Oh yeah.
And he says it several times in the movie. But she kind of gives him this beautiful piece, kisses him on the head, and then kind of lets him sit with it. And he's smiling. He feels better.
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder if she had sat there and kept talking, if it would have, taken away from it.
Ruined the moment.
Of course, scene transition was needed. But, oh God, that is so true. I think when you're hiding who you are, whether that's a sexual identity or a shame, something that you're ashamed of, you're not breathing.
Yeah.
And that's, we say, I feel like a weight has just been lifted from my chest. That's kind of the same thing as I finally get to breathe. I can exhale now. Yeah. It's not weighing on me anymore.
Yeah.
Ugh, I actually sat up and wrote that one down. I was like, this is so pretty. Yeah. I love you.
Well, I mean, so like in my work, in my practice, I deal a lot with addictions. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things I specialize in. And so with addiction, there's always shame.
Always.
There's always shame. Yeah. And I can imagine that was something that Simon had been feeling too. And one of the things that shame does, no matter what the shame is latched onto, no matter what it's about, is that shame tries to isolate us.
Yeah.
What shame does is say, you're the only one. Nobody else feels this way. Nobody else is thinking this. Nobody else is doing this.
And there's something wrong with you.
Yes. And so it snakes in there, separates you from the pack, and pulls you over by yourself.
Mm.
And because of that isolation, it makes you think, if I talk about this, no matter what the this is, if I talk about this and people know the real me, they're going to leave me. They're going to hate me. They're going to...
They're going to abandon me.
Yeah.
And I really will be alone now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and I know that the movie tries to honor that piece of it in some way, shape, or form, that does happen to so many people when they finally come out, and when they exhale, they suddenly have to breathe again and hold it.
Yeah.
Because families go, no, you're not. Or, you need to get out of my house. I've heard that story so many times. And thankfully, this is a feel-good movie, which we all need. And it's not an uncommon story. I know some people feel like, no, that doesn't happen. It does. Happened to me. Very similarly, actually, which I think is part of the reason why I attached to this movie so much.
The acceptance part?
Oh, yeah. Which is ironic because, like, he is outed because his messages get out.
Yeah.
My mom found a note I was writing in class.
Well, this is probably probably not pre-email, certainly.
No, but this was, like, used to pass notes in class.
Did you fold them a certain way?
Of course.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
folded up tiny, and then we would just write all over them, and I don't know how we would figure out whose message was next, but we did it. And I just remember her. It's just bless my mother's heart. I come downstairs one morning, and she was like, "Hey, good morning. Is there anything you want to tell me?" And I'm like,
"Is there anything scarier to hear from a parent?"
And I'm like, "What are you on right now, Mom? I mean, it's too early for wine. What are you doing?" I'm like, "This is junior year of high school." Yeah.
Did your brain go to?
Not at first.
Okay.
And I was like, "What? She's being weird." And then all of a sudden, it's almost like somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I went, "There's a note in my book bag." And it's weird because it was at the bottom. I hadn't looked at it. It was like months old. And I went digging for it, and I just turned around and started sobbing. And Mom was standing there, and she was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she's like, "I'm not upset in any way. I just wish you had told me first. I know things first." And I'm like, unfortunately, I think a lot of us tell the parents last, kind of like he did. The parents were the last to know because we don't want to lose our basic securities.
Well,
House,
he even
love, and
says
children.
in the movie, "I just didn't want things to change."
Yeah.
It's not that I wanted to keep you guys out.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want things to change.
And that's the fear, is that things will change. And they do to an extent. And the fear with parents is like, they're your attachment figures.
Yeah.
They are your home. And so when our parents react badly to
They're your
these
safe
things,
harbor.
yeah, we suddenly lose everything. So yeah, she was fine. Later on that day, we started talking about boys. So yeah, I'm watching this and I'm like, reading online, this isn't real. I'm like, you don't know. My parents are very much like this. My dad's not Josh Duhamel, but he's very open.
Yeah.
My dad's a weird person, but he's very open.
Well, and I think that's part of what I was mentioning earlier is like his family is so accepting and supportive and lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And then also feeling that grief of how many people don't get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, like, there are scenes in movies we don't want to watch that. And that's the truth, though. That happens. I wouldn't say it. I think it's changing, obviously. But he definitely got the better end of the stick when these things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he encounters Martin at school, I think I knew it had to happen.
Heavy sigh.
I knew we had to encounter him, and I think his reaction is, I'd say it's exactly what I would have done. I would have been afraid that like maybe I would have even tried to fight him or hurt him, which
Mm-hmm.
I've never gotten into a fight in my life. But just that's the amount of anger I was feeling.
Yeah, me too.
Which, actually that's probably more rage that I was feeling than it was anger. But, Martin tries to come up to him and kind of explain almost like, hey, I just needed all the attention off of me.
Almost justify.
And what he said, I just thought was so, when he just said like, this was my story. This was my and you took it away from me. I didn't
Yeah.
even get to come out the way that I wanted to come out. Like, you outed me.
And that's something that this community has that the rest of the world doesn't, I think. It's this opportunity to come out. And I say opportunity. Some people, like, even in the movie, why do only gay people have to come out? And then there's that hilarious montage of I'm straight and parents crying.
Yeah.
My favorite scene. But we had this opportunity to speak the truth and take control of our narrative in a way that I'm not sure other communities get. And it is an opportunity. It's a scary one, and it is. And so when that was taken away from him, it was, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it was just like sinking a ship before it hit the docks, you know? And I felt for him so much because a lot of people put a lot of thought into it, or they just spill it, but it's still theirs.
They get to decide.
And he stole it.
Yeah.
And
I think based on where they were in their email conversations, him and Blue at the time, I think he was almost there.
And exactly. It's, yeah.
But he just didn't get to choose.
And there's steps involved. I mean, you can't. I mean, how many of us have tried to skip steps in the stairs and fallen on our faces? Been there, and that's, I think, kind of what happened.
Yeah.
And then because these emails are posted, Blue deletes his email because he's scared. That scene destroyed me because I was like, this is his safe person right now. And even though his parents are so supportive, this is his safe person.
And he wrote, "Please don't leave me right now."
And then it went to
said
nowhere.
Permanently
Deleted.
Yeah, something like that.
And just knowing, I feel like at one point we've all felt something similar where our guts just drop. And it's hopelessness in that moment. And God, that scene hurt me. Like physically hurt me. And I was so angry and sad and confused and sad.
Yeah.
And then, not to mention, he leaves that situation. So now his safe person that he feels love for is gone, and he doesn't even know who he is. It's just gone, ripped away from him. He goes outside, or he goes to school, and his friends are leaving him.
Yeah. He sees him on the road, like he was going to pick him up, and he stops and goes and talks to them, and they have kind of unraveled this.
Him puppeteering them.
Yes. And this is where Leigh-Ann and I kind of differed on this. I was saying, I kind of get what they're feeling. As teenagers, maybe not the best at empathizing, maybe not the best at prioritizing.
Egocentric. I mean,
Egocentric, yeah.
Are.
And so they are thinking of themselves. Oh, you were trying to keep her away from me. Never mind that it's because he was being blackmailed and, this kind of stuff.
His whole life just changed.
Yeah, and he even says that. And then Leah, you were trying to get me to go out with him when I was really in love with you. And Leigh-Ann was saying, like, I just can't believe how terrible his friends are being there. And I'm like, I kind of get it. I mean, like, they're thinking of themselves, but he did do some crappy things under pressure of, blackmail, but he did do some crappy things.
I'm with Leigh-Ann on that one. That scene pissed me off. I was angry. I was like, do you guys... It's hard to understand what he just went through.
Yeah.
And that's actually why I love this movie, because it details it in a way that the outside world has never seen before. It's hard, it's scary, it's world changing. And so they don't see it from his perspective. I'm like, his whole life just changed, and I'm sorry it took you guys a couple extra months to start dating. You're dating now. Leah, I felt for, because she was in love with him, and there was like a double wham there. Like, oh, he doesn't love me. Oh, he's gay. So, that got ripped out from underneath her, and I get her being sad. I did not like the way they treated him, because I was like, oh my God, what's happening is like every gay's worst nightmare, every LGBT's worst nightmare. They're losing everybody.
Yeah.
His family is there, but when you're a kid, or when you're, how old was he? Oh, I don't even know if he's
in high school.
Your friends are the most important piece to you. And they're your family.
They're the first bit of your chosen family
Yeah.
that you're assembling.
And so when they leave you, and they illustrated it so well, because he's in the cafeteria right after that, and he has nowhere to go.
Sits by himself.
And there's humor in that scene with his ex-girlfriend, but...
Oh.
Did you date me because you think I look like a man?
Yeah.
No, I broke up with you because you don't. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Terrible.
But it does describe it, because he sits at a table by himself, and I'm like, in that moment, he's feeling so many things, and that's where the belongingness thing comes in, because in those moments, you need it more than ever.
Yeah.
And it was ripped away. And then, let's make things worse. The bullies come into school and start mocking him and the other out gay kid on a table in front of everyone.
Yeah.
I've experienced things like that. It is horrifying. Now, the drama teacher coming in and letting her mouth fly.
Oh my gosh, loved her.
I'm going to marry her.
Loved her.
You sweaty hormonal virgins.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. She was that movie would not have existed without her.
Her line earlier that she said right as the scene was transitioning, where she goes, "I was an extra in The Lion King." I was like,
I think
that's the thing she's holding on to. I
she's
love
like,
it.
"This is what I've gotten." And then she goes, they start the play again, and somebody starts singing badly, and you just hear, "I will kill you." I know it's bad, but I guffawed in the theater. She is one of my favorite people because she, as small as she is, has a character development that we don't get to see in those kinds of characters, the ones that are in the background making funny things, because you think that she's just this mean woman. And then you realize that she's hardened and she's says terrible things, but she's going to take care of you.
Yeah.
And she was, in that moment, she was his guardian angel because she swooped in, unfortunately put him in the hands of the vice principal.
Something that I think, like this episode and the episode I did with Sasha on Moonlight, like I walked into going, I don't have any experiences that are similar to what the characters are going through in these movies. And as a white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual, like
You won the raffle.
Yeah. I mean,
kidding.
But it's I just feel like I've got to come into these episodes with humility. I've got to come in with curiosity. And I've got to come in knowing, because I don't have these experiences, I'm not going to be able to bring anything from my life to this. What I've got to bring is space. Space that this story can really come into and rest and be presented to others who may not encounter it if they hadn't listened to the show. And in the episode about Moonlight, what I walked away with was a better understanding of what privilege is. Privilege is, I was privileged to be ignorant.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
To not have to know what it's like. And I think that, that is something, even just in I'm realizing this as you were talking, in my comments about his friends earlier, it's the privilege of not having to know, now my life is different. Because their lives were going to be the same.
If not improved, because they're dating now.
Yeah, and other than the fact that one of their friends is now out, like their lives is going to be are going to be the same.
Yeah,
his life, because I would say it appeared at least that he was one of the more popular kids in school. He was, got along with everybody. Yeah, and then now all of a sudden he comes to school the next day, and he's the target of bullying.
Yeah,
which. I was bullied in school. I was bullied in middle school. I was bullied in high school. The scene from a teen movie where basketball players stand around somebody in a circle and shove them back and forth, that happened to me in the library during one of my world history classes. So, like, I was bullied. I was not bullied because of something so personal, so identity focused. Yeah.
And I wouldn't take that away from yourself. Bullying is bullying. It's not fair. And I see it more and more. And I experienced it, and somehow, and this is something that I feel like we all work towards as humans, finding a place where we're safe. So when I was middle school, bullying was horrible. And then I got to high school, and I joined the marching band, and suddenly
What'd you
had clarinet.
Oh, nice. Trumpet. Yeah.
I believe that. But it was a safe place where, comments were made.
Yeah.
But if they were made, there was somebody standing behind me going, "Don't you say that to him again."
Yeah.
And I had a cheer squad, essentially. And we're all each other's cheer squads. And we built each other up. And we were there when horrible things happened. And that was my safety net. And I didn't lose friends when I started coming out, like he did for a brief period of time. But I do understand the fear. I did lose one. That was a separate kind of story, but so knowing that, it hurts.
One thing that I thought was striking about the in-between of him being outed and coming back to school was he started to Google how do you dress like a gay guy? Yeah. And I thought it's interesting that he felt like even for a brief moment, he had to now become somebody different. Like he thought, well, now I've got to dress a different way. because
Yeah.
I'm out and I'm gay.
I've got to change.
Is there a uniform? Maybe that's what he was
Yeah.
thinking.
It's sort of, yeah, like, how do I match this? How do I sit in this? And that's why I think it was so important, and it did come after that his mom said, "You're still you, and I need you to hear that." And I've seen it, people come out for whatever, and I think most of the time, people change the way they dress and act because suddenly they're not hiding it anymore. Like me.
So maybe they did exhale.
Yeah, and so for me, my wardrobe became very colorful. And because middle school it was black, I didn't want to be seen. And then exploded into color, and I like shiny things. I have a shiny jacket, I got rhinestone shoes, and it's not that I'm like, hey, look at me, but it's almost like, I feel comfortable in this, and I'm not afraid to be seen. And
I'm not afraid to be seen.
Not always. Like, we do live in Tennessee. There are certain times.
Well, but print that and put that on a sign. I mean, like, that is such a beautiful marker of acceptance of the self. I'm not afraid to be seen.
Yeah, and it takes a lot because that there are people out there who do want to hurt you, do want to do some things, and being strong in that takes their power away.
Yeah.
No, they're going to, yeah.
And I want to say this too, not afraid to be seen. I'm sure there are times where the fear comes back. It is impossible to be brave without being afraid.
Oh,
Bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is in the presence of fear, still making a choice to walk forward and to act. And so, I would say to anybody that's listening to this, if you're living in fear right now, please know that you don't have to get rid of the fear to be brave.
No. We need fear. We as beings need fear. And one thing that I found so fascinating that I was reading recently is that the brain was not developed to keep us happy. It exists to keep us alive. So that's why we hold on to the bad memories more often than the good ones, or why we feel fear in situations where we're like, we don't know, because we want to stay alive. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing now in this world where we don't have to be afraid of every corner, is changing our relationship to these feelings. Because fear can be our friend or it can be our enemy. Mm-hmm. And so when it becomes our friend and it's helping us, and it's maybe overprotective, but it still has good intentions. I use a lot of internal family systems.
Yeah.
So I love parsing out the pieces of the parts. And the fear part cares a lot.
And like brief little description of internal family systems. If you've ever in a conversation said to somebody, well, part of me thinks, that's a basic understanding of what IFS is. Mm-hmm. We are going to have an episode later on where we talk a little bit more about it, but that's a basic understanding of it. It's just, you've got different things inside of you that are giving you different messages, and that's okay. And in fact, it's even helpful to understand that. That scene where he's Googling that, it made me. I wanted to ask you about this, and I certainly know. You're not a representative for an entire community.
What are you talking about? I'm queen.
You're just a person. It made me wonder, him Googling that, was there kind of an absence of an Obi-Wan or a Yoda, like a mentor figure? Could a mentor figure have been helpful for him in that situation to kind of show him the way? Or was it just something that everybody kind of has to figure out on their own? Like, I know that my experience, my dad left our family when I was 14. There were so many things about growing up that I had to discover on my own.
Right.
Whereas I had friends whose dads showed them, this is how you act. this is how, even little stuff like I had to teach myself how to shave. I said to Leigh-Ann last night, the reason why I have a beard is not because I think beards are neat, but it's because I don't know how to shave myself without cutting myself. So it's a lot easier to just have a beard, and there we go. If he would have had a mentor, would that have helped? I mean, like I said, in your best, or is it just that's just something that everybody has to figure out?
Well, like his mom says at one point, there are parts of this that you have to walk through alone, and I hate that for you. The answer is yes and no. Well, yes and maybe. A mentor, somebody who's been there, who's already started living openly, living visibly, does help. They may not be exactly what you want yourself to look like, but sometimes you play with it. I kind of think of the scene where they're sitting waiting for the vice principal, and he's talking to Ethan. Mm-hmm. And Ethan's like, you could have told me. They could have. I think he was I lost my train of thought.
I mean, he might have been afraid to associate with Ethan
because of the way people treated him.
Yeah.
And so I think back on my own experience, my own story. I was able to come out and have friends who were already out, who had been out, and they immediately took me in. And they didn't here, Aaron, here's the way. But just by being with them, I was like, oh, okay, kind of taking notes, jotting them down in the back seat. But that helped me so much. So I think, yes, I think that it's good to see a living representation, which is why I love that LGBTQ community is getting so much, because when you don't know what it is, what do you do? And
I think, I'm not asking the question because I don't think there's, a mentor be needed because there's one way to be gay. There's not one way to be anything. Yeah. But I think it's a matter of having people.
Yeah. And support system.
Like in the same way that as I was growing up, certain people, just by modeling their own life, helped me to go, oh, I like that piece. I'm going to take that piece into me. Oh, I like that piece. I'm going to take that piece into me. To also have people come alongside him where he could do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And that's funny because isn't that what we do as therapists? We try to model, especially boundaries and attachment.
Yeah.
And so people can do the same thing. So that's kind of, So it's a hard question because I think some people benefit greatly from having somebody. Well, I think visibility matters. And at that point in his life, he turned to visibility on the internet. Mm-hmm. And I love that Anderson Cooper was the first person that came up in that Google search.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, yes, Anderson. He's a great representation because I just love him. So there was nothing wrong with what he was doing. It was playing with his identity. It was like, okay, this is new. What do we have here?
Mm-hmm.
And
which is, I mean, if there's not a better picture of adolescence in general.
Right.
I remember, describing to people before, like most of my adolescence was me trying on different hats, like they were trying on different identities like they were hats.
Oh, yeah.
Do I want to be this person today? Do I want to be that person today? And some of those things stuck around. Some of them didn't. Mm-hmm. Thank God.
Yeah. I've let go of a couple of them. I'm like, you guys are going in the retired folder now.
Yeah. So he has the encounter with Martin, says, get away from me. The movie, so they do the play. There's the big finish. And then he writes on the website to Blue because the email's been deleted or whatnot, deactivated, that, hey, after the play, you know where I'm going to be. And I'm a little bit oblivious, and I'm like, oh my gosh, where's he going to be? And then they have a carnival at the school, which looked like it was the size of a state fair.
Throwback to Greece, I guess.
Yeah. So he goes to the Ferris wheel, which circles back to the very first post on the website. Mm-hmm. And he gets on the Ferris wheel, and a crowd starts forming around it. And because he wrote the post on the site, they know
what he's
Simon's putting himself out there, and he's going to wait on, Blue. Oh, and when he had come to school, he even asked one or two people, are you Blue?
Yeah. And amazingly, as teenagers, none of them were offended.
Yeah.
And I loved it. They're like, no, but do you want to talk? I'm like, oh, where are you people? Yeah. We need you.
And maybe I'm reading into it, the guy that was a musician for the play, who he had pictured at one point being Blue.
Yeah.
He asks him, there was a couple of looks that guy gave him that made me think, oh, I wonder if he is seeing Simon's story and there's a story inside of him that's getting unlocked. So he goes to the Ferris wheel, he gets on it. A couple of people start to take videos. His friend Leah's like, no, don't video this. The internet has done enough.
Right.
He goes the Ferris wheel a couple of times. And he had like a big old string of tickets to do it. And at one point, the guy running it says, all right, this is your last one. And Martin comes up in an act of what I can only assume he is thinking is penance.
Yeah.
Gives the guy $4 and is like, the last one's on me. Like, let him ride it. Well, first off, and I said this to Leigh-Ann, I was like, I know it's not going to be true, but wouldn't it be funny if Martin came up and was like, I'm Blue?
That'd be some serious self-sabotage there.
And then he did. He came up and said, I'm Blue. And then Simon was like, no, you're not. And he's like,
right,
yeah,
I'm
I'm
not.
not.
This
I'm
is
not.
painful.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So he gives the $4 to him, and the Ferris wheel is going to go around again, and Simon's kind of waiting there, and you kind of know this is the last chance because it's going to go around again, and then it's over, and then you hear the voice.
Is the seat taken?
Yeah. Of Bram, and he gets on, and there was something in me, and like I said, hadn't seen the movie, so didn't know the story or anything, but there was something in me that kind of thought, oh gosh, I hope it's Bram.
Yeah, he was just such a good guy.
Yeah,
he had a good heart from the beginning.
So he gets on the Ferris wheel with him, and both Simon and him just immediately light up. Like,
major smiles.
Yeah, their shoulders drop a little, smiles, they're talking, kind of connecting the pieces of the emails, and they get to the top of the Ferris wheel, and like, I think they say I love you. Simon
they kiss.
Simon leans over and kisses him, and like,
cheers.
Oh my gosh. I mean, both Leigh-Ann and I on the couch are just, tearing up at that point because it's just...
Me too.
Oh, man.
I'm like, here comes the waterworks.
Yeah. And what's funny is it got me again in the next scene where he's going and picking up everybody for school, and you see the barista in the drive-thru hand 5 coffees to them. And then when he goes... So, like, I don't remember the order of who he picks up, but he's got Nick and Abby and Leah in the car. Leah's in the front seat, and then they go to stop again, and she undoes her seatbelt and gets in the back, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then Bram gets in, and then they just lean over and just do a normal, like, your significant other gets in the car with you, peck on.
A high kiss, yeah.
Yeah. And that was another thing that got me, was just like, oh my gosh.
It's so normal.
Yes, and I just thought
weird.
This movie stewarded this story so well.
Yes.
They treated it with such respect. They treated it with such care.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved it.
That whole ending, it's funny because I have 2 thoughts. That was kind of like where I mentioned that I love some of the movie, and there are parts that I'm just like,
Yes, tell me the hate.
I would say hate.
You said hate, though.
Okay, fine, I'll say hate. So I am so happy. I love feel-good movies. They make me happy. They inspire me.
As intended.
And I walk away from it going, how can I harness this happiness? And what can I do differently in my life? What changes can I make? Because I need some. And if we're talking realistically, I wish high school movies would stop implying the idea of I'm not okay until I'm in a relationship.
Yes.
I almost would have loved an ending. It would have been sadder, but an ending where he doesn't find out who Blue is, and he goes, you know what? I'm going to be okay.
I'm still okay.
And figures things out. Now, of course, we need the fanfare ending because it's a movie, and I'm looking at it realistically because I do feel like, I live it, and I see it all the time, that we have this idea of, if I'm not dating somebody, if I'm not with somebody, there's something wrong with me. And actually, I'm thinking of a Demi Lovato song where she says, you ain't nobody till you got somebody. And I find that flawed thinking. And because It's not true. You are
Sure.
a somebody, regardless of whether or not you have somebody. It feels good. But I do want the idea of we're okay by ourselves.
I
To
also
maybe be a
think that
little
that
more.
is a thing that every single one of us thinks at some point in time.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, it's not outside the box. It's not abnormal. All of us are in a place at some point where we say, gosh, if I just had someone.
Oh, absolutely. Because connection is key. It's
Yeah.
belongingness. That's
Yeah.
the hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are not happy and comfortable with ourselves, okay, I'm going to quote RuPaul because why not? He says at the end of every show, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
And there is some truth to that. Now, I don't want to marginalize people that don't love themselves because we've all been there. But at the same time, what he's trying to say is learn to be lonely. Learn what do you have that's in you that you're not paying attention to because you're looking for somebody else. And when you figure out what you've got, oh, that just makes you so much more ready to go out there and find somebody. And I mean, if we're comfortable being alone, then we're able to give more, I think, in a relationship.
Yeah, an ongoing discussion that Leigh-Ann and I have is both of us had done our own therapeutic work before we met each other. And through that really learned to like and love ourselves. And because of that, I think when we got together, just the ground had been plowed and fertilized enough to where a relationship could grow. I've said before, if God would have brought her into my life one day sooner,
It wouldn't have worked.
it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been ready. And I think that to those who maybe don't like themselves, who maybe don't love themselves, you know, in the same way that Simon didn't come out as like a singular event, he didn't cross the threshold of a door before he was straight, after he was gay.
Yeah.
Learning to love yourself is also a process.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're not there, you may be at the beginning of the process. And I would say, please just know that you're not alone.
No. And it is possible.
Yes, there's hope.
It is absolutely possible.
And that applies to whether or not, you know, you're struggling with your sexual identity, you're struggling with shame, you're struggling with anything. It's a process, and you're a person, and you deserve the room to have your process and figure yourself out in the time that you need and want. You deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta say, loved this movie. Loved it. It's a buy.
I'm pretty sure it's one of those that the day it was released, I was standing in Target buying.
Oh my gosh. There's been, yeah. So let's say that there's somebody out there that's listening to this
Mm-hmm.
who maybe their story has began to become unlocked inside of them. Is there anything that you could say to that person? Whether or not they're coming to terms with their sexual identity or not.
Or just their
Yeah.
personal identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say ride the wave. Because it's not all going to happen at once. It's going to be hard. You're going to get thrown on your head a couple of times. And the more you are able to to pick yourself up and keep moving forward and learning from things, the stronger you grow. And nothing happens overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. God didn't build the earth in a day. All these things take time. And you're okay in this process. There's not a right or wrong. This is your story, no one else's. No one can tell you what to do. This is yours. No one else can own it.
How important is community and support in this?
I think it's immensely important. I've noticed, especially, like, I know we've talked heavily about just the LGBT community, but I do see people from all backgrounds, gay, straight, bi, doesn't matter. We all have a story to tell, and and I've noticed that even the ones that don't have a lot of friends crave it. And I know in the LGBT community, you building yourself a community is so pivotal, because you build the support and you get to choose your family. And I think community is so important. So I know that it's so easy sometimes to sit at home and protect yourself. I just encourage anyone to try.
Yeah.
I know that putting yourself in a new situation is so scary. I speak from experience. I'm still doing it. And sometimes I force myself into new situations that I'm sitting in the parking lot going, I could just leave. But then I meet someone, or I hear something, or I experience something, and I'm like, I'm so happy that I did this.
Yeah, I think back to what you were saying about being in group therapy class and people coming up.
Yeah. If the community had not been there in that moment, I don't know how school would have gone.
Yeah.
But it went well.
Let's say that somebody is in a spot where it seems like community is not possible.
Okay.
Do you think that therapy is a good supplement to that?
Oh, yeah. Because what we're looking for is relationships. We're looking for connection. We're looking for belongingness. And you'll find that in therapy. It may not be this, giant fanfare thing, but you're not alone.
Yeah.
And you can learn that and see it because you're going there and you're seeing somebody and they're there for you.
Mm-hmm. So let's say that somebody's listening to this episode and they just feel like they could really connect with you and they would like to come and see you as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
Right now, the best way is through the Psychology Today tool. Google my name, search my name, Aaron Byrd. I have offices in Brentwood, Tennessee and Spring Hill, Tennessee. I hope to have a website up soon. Who knows? That would probably be the best way. There is an email on there. There is a phone number to call. Okay. Feel free to read.
Thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've never done anything like this before. It's kind of cool.
This is only the 6th time I've done it. So maybe 7th or 8th. I don't know.
And somebody finally let me just talk forever.
Oh, man. Well, it was such a privilege to have you come and talk. And I can't wait to have you back again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Yeah, I gotta say, one of, if not the absolute favorite episodes yet.
Yeah, it was really good.
One, loved Simon. 2, loved talking to Aaron about it. And then 3, love that I get to talk to you about it. You being Leigh-Ann.
It's me, everyone.
Yeah, here she is.
Here I am.
So you got a chance to listen to the episode ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about it?
So good. I can't believe just that we were lucky enough to have Aaron talk about this stuff with us, having gone through a lot of similar things personally, and he shared a lot of personal things, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. It feels like a gift that we got to hear that, and I hope everybody else agrees with that too. Yeah, and there was a ton of things that I loved about it. One of the things when he talked about his story that he shared, he was talking about his school counselor and how that, I think he had 2 school counselors. Anyways, just that were really impactful for him and provided a safe space for him to talk about his feelings and then be accepted. But in talking about that, I guess when he first went to a school counselor and told them about that he was being called gay and being made fun of for that, and Aaron didn't even really know what that meant yet. That his school counselor comforted him by saying, "You're not gay." And in the podcast, Aaron didn't really go back to that. I mean, I think he said, "Oh, maybe that wasn't great," but like the counselor, it sounds like was a really positive person for him, but that stood out to me a lot just because it just shows the importance of how we talk about these things, especially to kids who are figuring out their identity. I've had my work, like I work, with youth and mentoring, and we've been having a lot of conversations as an agency about how to make sure that we're being inclusive and welcoming to any person who wants to be a mentor or who wants, to be in our program to have a mentor. And I've just seen a lot of examples of that. Like you never know, one little comment that isn't necessarily inclusive. And Simon's dad was an example of this too. Like he made a lot of comments about, like looking at pretty girls and things like that, those comments gave signals to Simon that there was an expectation that he was heterosexual. Like his dad just assumed. And, his dad ended up being very welcoming and all of that. So I'm not, saying he was a bad person, but those comments, whether or not he meant them to, sent signals that, it's going to be some kind of issue or challenge if you're different. If you're not heterosexual, It's going to be outside of the expectation. So yeah, I thought it was interesting that Aaron's counselor said something like that to him, and it's good that he ended up being a positive figure in Aaron's life, but that easily could have impacted Aaron even more. It could have told him it's not okay to be gay. You're okay because you're not gay, which is just not true.
And I want to go back and highlight something that you just said. You said it's not that his dad was a bad person, because I think that sometimes we think in order, and especially when we're talking about a subject like this, if there's going to be hurtful things said, it's going to be from somebody who's coming from a place of hate. I think it's also important to highlight that even if you are a person in a position where you love the person that you're talking to, where you support them, where never in a million years would you ever come down on them or tell them that they're wrong or anything like that, that you can still say things unintentionally that can hurt or, heaven forbid, harm a person. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that in this case, language matters, even offhanded language.
So much.
And it's just important to maybe think about, especially if you have children that are about to become the age where maybe they're going to start thinking about sexuality, to start thinking about how am I going to talk to my child about this, but how will I respond when my child comes to talk to me?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think all that's true. Language is so important. And I think I love what you said. It's just not, people are going to mess up and that happens, but maybe just to try to be a little bit more conscious of how you talk about things, especially raising kids. Because the reality is every person goes through a period of time where they're developing that identity, like that, sexuality and gender identity. So it's just important not to send signals that tell them, I won't accept you if you are this way, because acceptance and love is so important to kids. And
like Simon's dad, if you find out that you were sending hurtful or damaging signals, it's still possible to repair.
Yes. And just be humble about it.
Yeah, it's still possible to, still be in the relationship and still express love and support. And
yeah. Which actually brings me to the next thing that I really liked. This is just something I wanted to highlight because I liked it so much, and it's something you said, and I forget where, but you made the comment that you can't be an ally and not be vulnerable. And this is, wow. I mean, we did not plan this transition, but it is working out perfectly because that's exactly what we're talking about. The reality is that if you're an ally, you're probably going to do or say something wrong, or you're going to ask a question that's insensitive. And not that that's okay and you should be thoughtless about it, but rather that like when it happens, be open to hearing that feedback, be open to hearing how it made somebody else feel, and then make yourself vulnerable in saying that you're truly sorry and that you'll get better. Like, try to learn. You've got to be vulnerable and willing to learn if you're going to be an ally. You can't ever go in to an allyship. You know, you're not an ally if you think you know everything about the person who you're wanting to kind of come alongside. You have to come from a point of vulnerability and openness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I love that you said that.
Cool.
And that worked out really well, the way we transitioned. Let's see. Oh, another thing that Aaron said that stood out to me was when he was talking about going through the counseling program at Trevecca. And he said one of the things he got from it in a weird way was an understanding of people who were against, you know, LGBTQ people. Like, he talked about having friends who started out anti-gay and then like got to know him. And when I first heard it, I think it made me a little sad, just because I hate that that's a position that he was in, that, you know, people who were anti something that he identifies as, that like he then had to like learn about and understand where they were coming from. That just seems unfair. But then at the same time, I think that's just incredibly, I don't know the word, beautiful. There's a weird, I don't know. I guess beautiful is the only way I can think about it. I just think it's amazing that a person could do that a person could have understanding for another individual who's like literally against them.
Well, I think where Aaron was coming at it from was not that he had to learn about people that were against, but rather he got to.
Yeah.
And that it enabled him. And I think it is a sign of just how, I hate the word enlightened, but like mature,
evolved,
Aaron is. Just that it allowed him to get to a place of having empathy for people that maybe don't have any desire to understand.
Yeah,
which I think life of another person.
That's why I say beautiful, because I do think at the end of the day, that's the kind of attitude, the kind of thought process, the kind of thing that needs to happen for people to stop being hateful towards one another on both sides. Like, the reality is, as much as that stinks, and I don't think it's fair, I think that happening is such a great, like, what a cool thing that now these two people who might have been pitted against each other in sort of life categories are friends and have reached, and not have reached an understanding, but what you said, like, they're empathetic towards one another because they know each other's stories. So it is a beautiful thing. It really, truly is. It's just like, it definitely made me think when he said that. It made me feel a lot of things and kind of have to process it and like think about it. Also, he agreed with me about the friends. I fist pumped when that happened because I think they're terrible, and I'm glad he agreed. And the last thing that I have like written down that kind of stood out was, well, there's a lot of things that stood out. This is a narrowed down list. Just that I loved that what Aaron said at the end, or about the end of the movie, that part of him hoped nobody would come to the Ferris wheel, because he doesn't like this like setup of you're only okay when you have a significant other, that like that's how it has to end up. I just wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think I mentioned that in like the first episode we did, Beyond the Lights. I keep forgetting it. Yeah, Beyond the Lights. I think I said something similar at the end of that episode too, because I would just 100% agree. I think you're worth everything. You're so valuable, and worth all of the good things, and worth having all the good things when you're single, just as much as, you know, if you're in a relationship. So yeah, that's all.
Nice. So for the movie, buy, rent, pass?
Buy.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Purchase it.
Boom. How did we watch it? We watched it on Redbox. Is that how I got it?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Well, that's this week's show. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you've made it all the way to the end, you win.
Thank you.
Please see us afterwards for your free high five.
Mm-hmm.
With that, we're going to go ahead and bring the lights back up and say that for this week, the theater is closed.